We hear you.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's a problem. Oh, it's
Linka, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, very well. All right. So, welcome everybody to a special CCS seminar. As you know, in this CCS seminar series, we like to disperse talks that highlight the research going on across the various departments of the school with other important talks and lectures and programs of the school. And one of the focus we've had and have been really wonderful seminars have been coordinated and driven by the School's Equity, Diversity and Inclusivity GDI Committee. This is the first one of these for the year. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Burrong and Wurundjeri people of the Eastern Kulin Nation, who are the custodians of the lands and waters and which we meet, and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and Indigenous people who are with us today. Our seminar today is on the intersection of cultural diversity, gender equity, leadership and mentorship in academia. I'm great to see so many people here in person. That's really, really pleasing. It's a hybrid seminar. Our speakers are actually going to be online, as is Linka, our chair. But it's wonderful that those who could be on site and come here to be together for the seminar are here. So with that, I'll hand over to Linka, who is one of the co-chairs of the Equity, Diversity, Inclusivity Committee in the school, to introduce the seminar and introduce the speakers. Linka.
Thanks, Terry, and thanks everyone for joining us in person and online. So our first speaker today is Associate Professor Francine Marquise, who is an NHMRC Emerging Leader, Viratel Charitable Foundation and National Heart Foundation Fellow. Francine leads the Hypertension Research Laboratory at Monash University in the Biosciences Department and has published more than 110 peer-reviewed papers in top journals. She's also secured over 10 million in competitive funding as principal investigator. Francine has won many awards, including the 2019 American Heart Association Hypertension Council Goldblatt Award and others, and was finalist for many other awards, including the Eureka Prize for Emerging Leader in Science. And the purpose of Francine's research is to build exceptional scientists that help to improve cardiovascular health using translational approaches to lower blood pressure via the gut microbiome. So we were aware of Francine due to a recent opinion piece that she published in Hypertension titled Rethinking Culture to Unlock the Potential of Medical Research. And this article really outlined why people with different diverse backgrounds are needed in research groups to enhance research outcomes. So today we have asked Francine to share her thoughts on how we can rethink research culture. So I'll just stop sharing this slide and let you share your slides, Francine. Please join me in welcoming Francine.
No, thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to share some of my views and really looking forward to the discussion as well, because I think that's going to be a lot of things, new interesting concepts for us to think about how we apply to medical research and how we run our teams and interact with each other. So you might have heard of a phenomenon called Great Resignation that has hit academia some years ago. So this was just one of several articles that was published in Nature talking about researchers leaving academic masses. And we really need to think about why people leave. I have been thinking about this for a long time. I see people leave a lot, cardiovascular research, for example. So I'm always wondering what makes people leave. And I saw this article that was published in the MIT Sloan Management Review some years ago, where they looked into 34 million online employee profiles in the US. And they tried to estimate what were the top predictors of people leaving the workplace. And the number one by far was toxic workplace culture. And this was further defined as being a place that is disrespectful, non-inclusive, unethical, cutthroat, and abusive. And the number one factor that dictated this toxic workplace culture was toxic leadership. Other factors that influence people living workplaces include job insecurity and reorganization, high levels of innovation, and failure to recognize performance. And I'm sure you can appreciate that many of these are things that we commonly see in our jobs in academia and in research. But what was really fascinating for me was that toxic workplace culture was 3 times more likely to influence someone living in a workplace than any of the other factors. And that made me reflect in the culture that we have in research. And I love this quote from Eli Goldratt that says, "Tell me how you measure me and I'll tell you how I'll behave." And we sometimes behave as if research culture was like this. We have performance, and that's traditional metrics such as papers, grants, and supervision. And we have parallel to that workplace culture that we assume it's a nice thing to have, but it doesn't necessarily influence how we perform at the workplace. But I think that we got this model wrong. I want to share with you some real-life examples of today's culture in research. And these are examples that either I have witnessed, people that I mentored outside my team have come and told me, or people have shared with me on social media. And these are things that they seem quite, they don't seem quite extreme, some of them, but they just promote a culture that is not productive for research. So, for example, when someone comes and shares something with you, the response is, "I'm sure they didn't mean it," or "You're being too sensitive," or "How you don't know how to do X, you're training this very famous lab," or "We don't need to report it, nobody got hurt," or "It wasn't serious," or "My PhD or postdoc was long, difficult days, so yours should be too." Or "They won't have a green research because they do something else on the weekends." And one that I think it's really summarizes some of the terrible culture of how we communicate and how we allow people to bring their whole self to work. So that's how I do things in my lab. If you have a problem with that, we can take it outside. And I think that there are many other issues that I won't mention today because of time, but these is that like a combination of all of these factors is that making me think about what is that we want to do, like when we become researchers, what is that we want to achieve and how we're going to get that and how we can do it better and faster as a research community. And I'm sure in everybody's lives, we have turning points, and I'm about to share one with you that is actually quite personal. I've been very open about it, but it's still something very personal. So 9 years ago, in 2015, when I was changing into my second postdoc, I had one of my biggest turning points in my life, and that was my diagnosis with advanced stage ovarian cancer. So for those not familiar with stats for ovarian cancer, they are really bad. And the chance of me being here today, and not just alive clearly, but also cancer-free was very low, probably about 10-15% of being cancer-free 9 years later. And that made me reflect a lot about the legacy what I wanted to leave behind. If I ran out of time, what would I leave behind? And I think sometimes we don't think about this, especially people like my age or younger. We think we're young, we have all the time in the world, and that's not necessarily true. So I start to reflect about like how much I enjoy my job, but how I make other people also enjoy doing the job that we do. And I speak from a highly privileged position that I have like a long-term position. I dictate who I work with, who I play with, and what I do in terms of the research. Not everybody, even in my team, they can dictate that as well. So we need to consider like what impact like the research culture that we have can have in our teams, and not just the ability to choose like what do they do inside the lab. So I start reflecting about what if we could go and to work and be happy at work every single day? What if we felt valued and also safe when we're at work? And what if we felt like we belong? What impact those things would have, not just on how we feel like when we go to work and we show up, but our teams as well. And the impact that that has when people go home and the lives that they live at home as well. And I guess in the end of the day, as medical researchers, the biggest hope that we have is that we're going to improve human health. But sometimes we're willing to sacrifice not just our own health, but also the health of our team members and the people that we work with for a promise of future health for other people. And I really think we need to consider whether that's something that is the right question to be asking, and also whether that's ethical. And what I believe that we can do is that if we change the way that we lead and we behave in the workplace, we can have a positive impact in the health of those people around us. And perhaps greater and also perhaps more immediate, the impact of the research itself. So what if research culture really is that research culture dictates then our workplace performance? And with that in mind, I set up and I led my team with putting the culture first. And what I noticed after I have been now at Monash as a lab head for 5 years is that we're able to achieve much more and be much more productive and much more successful than we imagined that we were going to be able to achieve, that we set up to achieve. And the amount of personal growth that I have seen in every single team member has also been incredible. And I really think that the workplace culture had a big role. So with that in mind, I wrote a paper that Lincoln mentioned that was published 2 months ago, where I tried to set up like a bit of what I believe are the foundational aspects. And this is, of course, they're my views of what I believe are the foundational aspects for both the impactful research that we aim to do, as well as impactful teaching for us that are academics. And the reality is that we want this impactful research because that ticks the box of what is considered the academic success, and we can have a whole discussion about what success really is. But we want something that has community benefits. So I believe that we need to take a people-centric approach for that. And the foundational aspects for that, they include holistic safety, particularly the psychological safety. That is something that we don't talk about, and that's going to be the focus of part of this talk. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, recognition of effort, as well as mentorship. And I believe these are the foundation because these allowed us to really be curious in the workplace. They allow us to be willing to take risks, and they allow us to ask the big questions, the really impactful questions that allow us to collaborate with each other, that then lead to this impactful research and the community benefit. So I'm going to mention briefly diversity, equity, and inclusion and mentorship, because I think there is a lot that is already being done in this area. And I think that these are very, very important conversations, but I think people are much more aware of those. And I want them to mention a little bit more on recognition, and then especially on psychological safety, because I think this is some still very new concepts in research. So in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I just want to mention that I believe that the biggest barrier that we have to proper inclusivity is privilege. And we're just talking about privilege before, like everybody has different degrees of privilege. And one of the things that we need to be aware is unconscious or implicit bias that we have that impact, like based on our previous experiences and privilege, that impact how we behave towards other people. And the biggest thing that you can do is just being aware of your unconscious bias. And in the paper, also in an article that I shared in the Franklin women community, I have a lot more things about diversity, but for the purpose of the time, I won't be sharing today. The second one that I want to mention is about mentoring, and just to highlight that this is not the same as supervision. Not every single supervisor is also a mentor. A mentor, the definition that I'm using here, is someone who can really develop the career of the mentee, having 2 key roles, one that is career focused, so enhancing the mentee's professional performance and development, and the other one is about the psychosocial function, acting as a role model and also support system. So think about, like, for your own teams, like how we can make sure that we're improving mentoring and also facilitating external mentoring support. Then the third thing that I want to mention is about the recognition of effort. And I think when we think about effort and recognition in particular, we probably go straight away in terms of authorships, awards, grants. And sure, those are essential. There is no doubt about that. And it's especially important for career progression because we need those for promotion and for fellowships and grants. But what I want to mention is that is really fundamental for teams is recognition when there is behaviors that there is no apparent reward for effort. So for example, helping other people, because this is really important for inclusive workplaces, and it also leads to senses of belonging as part of teams. And these include, for example, who books rooms, who plans the catch-ups in your teams, who brings the birthday cakes, and who especially washes the dishes and put the dishes away after the birthday cakes, who takes notes in the teams. The problem is that a lot of the time, underrepresented groups, especially women, ended up with those activities. So in practice, some of the things that I think we need to be better recognizing, of course, acknowledge authorship and papers and CI and AI positions in grants. I'm very generous with my grants. I'm still very junior in my career, but all of my grants I usually have an ECR. And that hasn't been an issue about getting grants in terms of authorship as well. My advice would be to try to be very inclusive. But in practice, the other things that I wanted to mention about recognition of effort is saying thank you, leaving a note or a card, or publicly mentioning help. We start our meetings, for example, saying what we're grateful for, and everybody shares something either from the weekend, or sometimes people share something that someone else helped them in the week before. And it's actually really lovely that people want to put in their effort because they also see the acknowledgement. Another one that has been very fun is we set up lab awards for our Christmas party for helping behaviors. So these are behaviors that we usually don't get any recognition in, like, let's say, Rio Awards. But for example, recognition for being resourceful, for helping other people, for finding papers and sharing them with the team, for being funny and actually bringing some humor into our teams. Even for failing, we have an award for failing, and it was very competitive of who had the biggest fail and what they learned from it. And those, the team loves it, and it becomes something that people can celebrate, and they see the recognition of their effort too. And another one is spreading their load. So as I mentioned, it is really important that we recognize and also share this office housework, so that not always the same people are doing it, because otherwise they can lead to delays in promotion because time is limited, right? So if we're putting the time all in helping the team to come together, we're not necessarily having the same time to work on papers and grants. And we need those to not delay promotion of underrepresented groups. And also it increases burnout. So think about that and those first topics I mentioned about why people leave. And finally, I want to mention about safety. And the first one that comes to mind when we think about safety would be physical safety. And I think Monash is a fantastic place in terms of physical safety. We have a lot of support, a lot of regulations, a lot of ways that we can improve safety for our teams, especially for those that work in a lab. And this is important because, of course, like the work that we do as medical researchers comes with a lot of risks. There was a death at the CSIRO in 2007 that was blamed on complacency because they were not following guidelines for liquid nitrogen handling, for example. So there is a very important role for us to follow physical safety guidelines. But what I want to mention about safety is about team psychological safety. So team psychological safety was defined by Amy Edmondson, who is a professor at Harvard University, as a shared belief held by team members that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So I believe this is particularly an issue for academia and for research. So she talks about how in environments when there is a combination of high uncertainty and interdependence, and that's us doing research all the time, right? When we have low psychological safety, it basically drives a suboptimal performance because it puts people in this anxiety zone that they're unsure about their job safety. about whether they're physically safe, whether, what is happening to their research and so on. So I want to share some of the strategies of putting our teams back into this learning zone. Because the problem is that when we are in this anxiety zone, and when we don't have psychological safety, is that what happens is that we don't ask questions. We don't try to innovate because failure is just not acceptable. And we also don't share ideas and voice concerns because that's never going to be well taken. So she also set up a framework that has 7 traits of a team that has psychological safety. And as I'm going through them, perhaps think about like on your own teams, whether these are things that your team has. And perhaps something that we all could do is also ask our team members to try to rate how they feel about it in terms of these factors. So the first one is, if someone makes a mistake in this team, it's not held against them. The second one is that members of the team are able to bring up problems and issues. People on the team accept others for being different. It is safe to take a risk on the team. It isn't difficult to ask other people for help. No one on the team would deliberately act in a way that undermines other people's efforts. Skills and talents of the team are valued and utilized. So how we actually build this in a team. So some examples of doing that is that we admit our own fallibility. And as a supervisor, I'm also human, and I also make mistakes. So I'm the first to apologize and to talk about what we need to improve in terms of like my future behavior, for example. And we openly discuss issues and mistakes without blaming people. So when there are, for example, OHS incidents, when there is something goes wrong with like data, someone makes a mistake, we talk about it. We don't try to hide things because we want people to come and bring things forward. And if we don't make a space for that, if we're not willing to talk about it and listen, that's not going to happen. We also ask the stupid questions. I know we say sometimes, oh, there's no such a thing as a stupid question. There are, sometimes there are, but I usually joke that I'm the first one to ask the stupid questions. So we don't just welcome them, but we also expect the stupid questions to be asked, because we want people to ask the questions, not just to go on and try to find a solution elsewhere. We also provide feedback without expecting backlashes. We have respect with each other no matter what. We actively listen to each other. We also don't talk about people. We include people in the decision-making, and especially things that affect the team. We don't disclose or abuse of private information. And finally, we respond productively to feedback and ideas. So think about how we apply that. And I also think that we need to sometimes consider the language that we use. Like as scientists, we are intrinsically very curious people. So how we make sure that we use this curious language as well. So I start changing the language that I use with my team when there are issues in particular, and that has made a huge difference. So these come from the Rumble language box from Brené Brown. If anyone wants to do some more research about her work, is really fascinating in terms of the application that for leadership. And the way that usually these are used is, I'm curious about what happened that led to this incident. Help me understand what steps you took that made you conclude that you made a mistake. That's not my experience of this person. Tell me more about how what happened at the animal house. I'm wondering what steps you took to get to this conclusion. Walk me through the issue here. Tell me why this doesn't fit or work for you. And I'm working from these assumptions. How about you? So it's about removing blame and talking more about setting up the environment from more a curious perspective. And part of it, something that I highly recommend, is setting up a lab manual, because it helps us to set expectations for everybody. And if you're curious about, if you haven't seen one, heard of one before, you can have a look on our website. It's now open for everybody to see. Feel free to download, copy, adapt to your lab as well. And it helps new team members to understand how the lab works. It also helps to dictate the culture of the lab. And it sets a commitment to the team that we want to be, because we're going to make mistakes. Everybody's going to make mistakes because we're humans. But it basically makes a commitment that we're going to circle back to that and we're going to try again. but it also lays out a supportive culture that I have found has helped me a lot in terms of recruiting for the team, because people that align with that and they want to be part of the team, they're the people that contact me, that they want to build that team as well. So what if we circle back to the beginning and change to some new real life examples? So instead of saying, I'm sure they didn't mean it, we say, help me understand what happened from your perspective. Or you're being too sensitive becomes, I can see this is hard for you, what support looks like. Or how you don't know how to do X, let me show you how to do X. So let's find someone that can show you how to do it. Or we don't need to report it saying, our team's health and well-being is my priority, so let's report and discuss with the team. Or my postdoc was very difficult days, yours should be too, saying my postdoc was very long days, I don't want you to burn out too. Or they won't have a career in research because they have something else to do it, and saying that's good that they have boundaries and have work-life balance, they're less likely to burn out. And finally, instead of saying that that's how we do things in my lab, we say, I'm curious about your thoughts on this matter, help me understand how you think it would affect the results and what we could do better. I really think that in the end of the day, we want, as medical researchers, we want to help other people. And I like this quote from Bob Chapman, who is the CEO of Barry Miller, that says, we measure success by the way we touch the lives of others. And we have an incredible potential opportunity as researchers to do this, because we can do that indirectly via research, but that may take a long time, but we can start having an impact on people's lives directly today if we just change the way that we interact with each other. Thank you.
Hard to hear the clapping in the audience, but I'm sure there's lots going on. Thank you, Francine, for a really thought-provoking talk. We'll take questions at the end. We'll keep going with our second speaker, but hold on to those questions and comments, and we'll circle back. So I next wanted to introduce Dr. Rwangi Fernando. Rwangi is an accomplished IT expert and AI specialist with a strong academic and consulting background. Rwangi has a strong history of advocating for gender equity in STEM, especially addressing the intersectional challenges faced by women of colour in STEM. She is a champion of women of colour in STEM and advocates for diversity and inclusion in the sector. Dr. Fernando founded STEM Sisters, an organisation aimed at empowering women of colour in STEM, which to date has received national level accolades, including the Tech Diversity Business and Media Awards, Victoria Multicultural Excellent Media Award, and others. Her dedication to fostering diversity, inclusion, and intersectionality in STEM has earned numerous other accolades, including STEM Women Changemaker, Asian Australian Game Changer, and she's made a significant impact to these fields. I recently had the pleasure of meeting Rwangi at the Melbourne Awards, and I really, in speaking to her, wanted to invite her to talk to us at the school about her insights in innovating for inclusivity, strategies for a diverse STEM future. So please join me in welcoming Rwangi to our seminar today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you so much, Francine, for that wonderful presentation. Following an academic journey until I became myself an entrepreneur, I felt and experienced quite a lot of them, and that was thought-provoking. I really want all the academic leaders to listen to you and really embrace those skill sets too. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for it, and also for Monash School of Translational Medicine for this opportunity. So my talk is on innovating for inclusivity, strategies for a diverse STEM future. So I am coming more on I'm trying to take diversity on a more general background, but also with my initiatives because there is low representation of women, and also understanding who these women are, there can be more towards understanding those challenges and what are actual possibilities for inclusivity and how we can all benefit from having. So I wanted to bring the discussion starting from the innovation perspective. So wherever we talk about a practice of implementation, practical implementation of ideas of resulting something new or changing something new for better service or good is what we call as innovation. So one of the key elements which drives innovation that is been fundamentally so important, have been highlighted by so many researchers, is diversity. So when we understand diversity, there are three types of categories. So the first is what we call as the demographic type of diversity, which mostly what we are born with. It can be the gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and ability. Then there is experience sort of diversity, what we are kind of, where our surroundings, what we been exposed to, ROPs and things like that, which shape our, thoughts. Experiences. And then you have the cognitive type of diversity, and how do we, look into problems and with their solutions. So it's very important to make sure that we understand all different categories, because just someone maybe from a sexual orientation would not think the same, or would have the similar issues, or, how do we see as whether it's a half full or a half empty. But this is all how we scientifically say the categories of diversity, and therefore understanding them. And when these categories of diversity stack up with, one on the other, the opportunities are also quite good. But if you see it as a problem, then the challenges are also many. So in the Australian context, specifically considering women, this is what we have to play with as a landscape. So 36 of university qualified, like your university enrollments in STEM are 36%, right? So there is 36% women who is being qualified through the university segment. Of course, we need to increase that. We need 50%, but we are in the 36. Out of 36, only 15% who are qualified in STEM is working in STEM. So this is where I wanted to pay the attention most, right? And ultimately, only 27% of the STEM workforce is representative of women. So of course, I agree, we need to focus on the attention of getting young girls into STEM, put them into university, get them interested in science and mathematics. But it's not the only problem that we have. And actually, it's not the one that we really need to focus at this moment. For a number of reasons, I say this. Because out of all of those women, only 15% willing to work in STEM, so that the 85% is either unemployed or working in non-STEM industries, right? Because as Francine mentioned, the work culture in STEM, whether it's academia or industry, is toxic. It's such male dominant and it's so toxic. So therefore, there is a retention issue for women and women going into leadership, right? So the gender equity pay gap recently announced is 22%, right? And this year was very significant. So we could see the organizations, what exactly those parities, but still I would say, understand, we talked about different categories of diversity. This is only talking about women. We don't know what is for a ethnicity or ethnically or racially diverse woman. We know from the statistics from other countries, similar like Australia, like UK, what that is. It's quite low, right? So we haven't got even the statistics to begin with. Across the world, we're talking about a gender pay gap of 133 years. Sorry, my slide is a little overlapping here. To cross the gender pay gap, we need 131 years. And I don't believe that's a target anyone should have, none of us in this audience would live that long, and it's not a problem if you really, we'll talk about, like Francine said, if you really take measures, this target shouldn't be there. It should be a 5 years target for each and every organization, or a 10-year maximum to achieve that. And moving on from that, in terms of senior management, there is again quite a problem. So it's a problem. Of course, we have a problem at the starting position, but it's also the focus about how these women are working. What are those working conditions? Are they really welcome? Are the workplaces are inclusive? Because if they don't stay long in their jobs, they won't get into leadership, they won't retain, and therefore we will follow this same problematic nature as we go along. Now, we'll consider this as an opportunity. So currently, Australia is losing 122 billion per year, not having women be part of the economy, right? So what I want you to understand, because always I feel like sometimes this discussion about women or diversity comes from a point of view like a charity. Oh, we need to help them. It's like opportunity, we have to be fair. That's true, but it's also about benefiting every one of us as a society. So that's what is so crucial, right? And particularly in STEM, what we need at the moment is we are looking at just next year, 90% job will have STEM skills. So science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, right? So that means there is so much of opportunity here. And then by 2030, we will need 1.2 tech workers, right? And still we don't have 1 in 4 boards have no women, right? I wanted you all to see these challenges as opportunities, right? Though, because there is something less means there is an opportunity to fill them up, right? But if we actively, if there is more, like what I would say is, like, people are talking about diversity hires, whether that is, ethical or unethical. No, it is the starting point. So be a champion to do those diversity hires, get the numbers right, have those boards and workplaces have this equality, and for the people from diverse categories, not just women, for all, as we talk about all the diversity categories, it's important to cover up all of them, right? So intersectionality, that's where I mentioned when there is multiple diversity layers as an individual, when you face them, then we call them as an intersectionality, because you belong to an intersection. Just an example for myself, I'm a woman, but also I'm a culturally, ethnically diverse woman. So therefore I have those two. But if I was having a certain disability or I am a LGBTQI plus member, then that can be add-ons, right? So the layer, as we add more and more, the challenges is higher, right? The opportunities are also, that's what I wanted to see. A person like that, it should be an asset to an organization, right? Coming from all these perspectives and the views, right? So when you see this intersectionality, I want you to see that when we provide solutions, right? Just to give an example, if you give a clothing item, because a lot of us, we as leaders or, government or policies, we try to give solutions to them. I'll tell you one simple example. All women face a glass ceiling because we are still not gender par, right? Of course. So therefore, that's an agree. But if you are in an intersection, what you have is not a glass, you have a concrete, right? So when you have a concrete, can you use the same tool to break a glass to break a concrete? You can't, right? So the tool has to be different, right? So therefore, it's a similar example what I've provided here. If you are giving shirts so that, like one model of shirts to everyone, right? There is no point, because that shirt would not fit in, right? Equality is a good thing, but before equality, we need to profound on our equity, because not everyone is in the same position, right? Not in the same grounds. So once we get everyone with the same ground, giving shirts, the same shirt to everyone works. But if not, we need to start somewhere else, right? So understanding that people need different shirts is the diversity, making sure like it fits is the equity part of it. Understanding that we wear different shirts is the acceptance part. And the most profound thing is making someone feel, happy and proud to wear their shirt and being accepted, which is belonging, right? So here I want to say, because my work, I love to solve all the problems in the world, but I believe in focus and attention to a matter. So being a woman of color, and I've seen the gaps. I've started STEM Sisters in 2017 when I started my PhD. And something that I saw, the intersectionality problem in Australia was not discussed in any other way. So I thought of starting on my own, because of really to address this. But I've seen there are so many initiatives given for women, but we didn't know, what women of color or intersectionality of that what they need and what we need to do. So this was by the Chief Scientist report about the STEM workforce. This is issued in 2020. That was the first time ever there was some insights on this matter. So you can see here there is, there's a larger portion of who are born overseas, actually 56%, right? 56% of university qualified women in Australia are women who are born overseas, but they are Australian women, right? This is published in 2020, but from the stats in 2016, the numbers would be much higher now. And also, this is not considering international students. This is not considering temporary visa holders, none. So definitely the numbers are even large if you consider all of that. But I wanted to pay the attention for unemployment. Now, we all saw how, like all know, like how much that Australia needs STEM skills and how much we are like in demand. There are constant, like, you know, if you go back to whatever the era, there'll been always been asked for STEM people and women, right? In a demand, such a demand space, there is so much high rise unemployment, right? And you can see here, you know, comparing 2006 and 16, this is all what we have for the moment as per the information. We rose, like, you know, we had a, rather than a decrease for people who are like women who are born overseas from, you know, 5 point, like, you know, 5 point to 14.1. Basically, we are currently at more than 4 times unemployment compared to women born in Australia. Right, so this is a matter of ethnicity and racial diversity issue. So what I wanted to see again, though we see as a problem, see as an opportunity, right? So the McKinsey study says the financial performance of an organization having gender inclusive, having equal amount of gender representation can increase your profitability by 25%. If you have got it ethnicity and real diverse aspect bringing into the organization, it can go up to 36%. So see this as an opportunity. So these are the simple reasons. We didn't have those statistics when we started STEM Sisters, but working in the ground, we saw the problem as it is, and we knew where the problem is. So therefore, that's why STEM Sisters were born. So STEM Sisters, we support women of color. It's a very difficult, like, you know, I don't want to define what it is as. So if you say that you belong to a woman of color, that's fine. That's all that we ask for. But we are inclusive of international students, temporary visa holders, permanent residents, second generation. We love to support Aboriginal community as well. And we have supported in some ways, but even if they wanted to belong, that's what it is. So anyone who calls themselves as a woman of color is welcome. So these are the 4 key areas that we see as a leaky pipeline for our women. We see lack of role models, mentors, and peer networks, lack of opportunity to engage with the STEM professional network, bias in employment and advancement opportunities, stereotype threats that implicit personal confidence. So all our initiatives, we have range of them. Again, because why? Women of color are so diverse. Again, right? We have so much diversity within that niche. Like we are not niche, but in terms of, you know, even with the proportion, there is so much diversity. So just by running a mentoring program doesn't fix everything, right? So throughout the years, we have implemented so many, and they're covering on a wider range of activities. Starting with ambassador programs, they're all unique. Like there is simply none out there which exactly what we do. So that's why we do it. Otherwise, we wouldn't replace anything what is existing. Our mentoring programs are unique because there are 3 different structures to it. And also our mentors has to be from that STEM discipline. We match them only on the STEM discipline, but more importantly, they have to be women of color. You need to be in those shoes to understand someone that struggle in their pathway and really help. Of course, someone different context can bring that value, but a lot of women that we encounter are really struggling and they don't know how to navigate, and it's hard for someone who have not been in their shoes because you can see the unemployment and see the differences, you know. We have a lot of events and workshops. We have a magazine, an award-winning one called Magnify. We are now about to release our 11th issue. And it's all about talking stories about women of color in STEM, just starting from their, you know, maybe we are PhDs or international students to, you know, like we call them as big sisters STEM stories up to that. So we not just celebrate the highest achieved women, but everyone. That we couldn't see, there is less media. I think there is an improvement in the STEM ecosystem on this, but we couldn't see less women celebrated in STEM or Australian STEM context, but like basically to none to next women of color. So this is our own way of doing that, and we have been doing well. Awareness of Opportunities is a LinkedIn group where we support with opportunities. We have over 2,000 members there, and we are growing great. And one thing I wanted to say, though we are an organization for women of color in STEM, one of our, our outreach activities, mainly for young kids, we wanted to bring an activity from UK called Soapbox Science. So being Soapbox Science, we now have the authority for Melbourne and Sydney. Now, in this case, though we are an organization dedicated for women of color in STEM, and once we have this title for Soapbox Science, no other organization can have it in Melbourne or Sydney. So therefore, being inclusive and doing the right by, this event includes all women and non-binary individuals. Right? So that's what I say, it's important to consider that. These are some of the awards that we have won. Due to time permit, I would not go through all of that. In addition to STEM Sisters, I have two other social enterprises, which along with Dr. Molly Muse, my co-founder, like my sister, this is because we wanted to work with the organizations to really tackle the problem, industry, academia, anyone who needs help, because we are not coming here to pinpoint, say you are doing wrong. What we all want is to move forward from where we are at. So organizations need support. They need to find talent. Women have been so let back. So now women don't want to even apply for sometimes positions because they have said no, or not heard back. So we have a recruitment agency. That's how we have started. We do research and consulting. Apart from that, what we saw is in the problem is a bias, right? It's unconscious bias, can be conscious bias. We all have bias within us. So there is a platform which is AI driven. What we do is we remove the biased elements from their CVs or their profiles. So in that way, your name is not there, your age is not there. Any information that lead up to understanding who you are, which is not relevant to your skills or your experience, is being removed by the system. So you are being assessed only for that. So we did an MVP last year, but now we're actually coming with more stronger, with having more AI components coming in, will be released towards end of April. That's up to. So now call for action. Now, you may think, okay, this is a big problem, where to get started? But there is always point you can start, right? What I wanted to tell you from my story, I came here as an international student and I saw a problem and I wanted to take action in some or minor way. I didn't care whether I'm making a difference in one person's life or two. Right? Of course, I didn't expect, I'm an academic, I never expected to have a career what I'm having now. No, not that it's easy, it's challenging. I would have been much relaxed being an academic or working for CSIRO where I did my PhD. But still on, I think this is so important that we take action. And specifically, so anyone, like what people really need is to really listen to them, as Francine mentioned, really welcome them, feel them belong. That's the starting point of thing, right? So if you really do that, and also especially if you have bad experience, it can be men, women, anyone, please be the person to stop that happening to the next person or your subordinate. Don't pass on that. Right? And especially for women, I say, or if you are any underrepresented group, have a community on your own. It's very important to have that sisterhood, or because I say that's a simple reason that I called my first organization STEM Sisters. I want to see women supporting women, and being a good sisterhood is so important. And I always say for women or any underrepresented group, never fight for one seat. Right? It's so important because that's what they a lot of do. They show one seat and then let us fight for it. What we should fight is for more seats, right? Because we are we need to be more represented, right? So if you really align yourself to all of these and start small, start where we can, be the person to stand up if something is injustice happening, because it's so important to do that. And then this is how you can contact me. And as I said, what we all want is to feel belonged and loved and cared. So I think it's not a hard ask to do. It's just that what we want to feel, we share that with others, and that will all can be part of a great community.
Thank you. I'm clapping online, but I'm sure there's lots of claps in the room if we can't hear the room. Hopefully someone can take the microphones off. Thank you so much, Rwangi and Francine, for so generously sharing your stories today. Perhaps, Rwangi, if you stop sharing your final slide, just so everyone can see us on the big screen in the room. So I think while people are sharing microphones and summarising in the room, in the Hub Theatre, I just think there's some strong themes that have come out of both of your talks, which I think everyone has learned something today, and we really value your insights. One of the things that I saw sort of really coming out from both talks was that sense of making sure that people feel like they belong, and that culture is really at the core of any future success for research. And so I just wanted to know if you had, I know you shared some really practical tools, both of you, but if there was anything specific that you thought was really helping to get down to that, ensuring everyone feels like they belong to that group, whether it be the lab manual at the start that you mentioned, Francine, or whether it's other interpersonal conversations that you ensure happens, whether that's conscious or subconscious that you ensure happens to harness and build that culture. So I wonder if either of you wanted to comment on that further.
I'm happy to jump in. Thank you, Link. I think that's a very important point. I think we have been putting so much emphasis in terms of achieving diverse teams that we forget that if we don't have inclusivity as well, that if people can bring their whole selves as part of the team, that diversity is going to do nothing to the research. So you're not going to see a benefit of the diversity if you don't promote also the inclusivity. And the lab manual has definitely helped. Something else, and I'm happy to talk more about it perhaps another time, is we set up our lab values. So I ask my team, what do you think should be the key values of our team? And they tell me it's not my values, it's the values that they perceive that we as a team should have. And I ask them, if you could go to your dream workplace, how would people show up at this place? How do we go about achieving that? And those values are based on that. And we also then set up behaviors that support those values and behaviors that we agree that we don't tolerate as a team. And I can tell you that every single hard conversation that I have had to have, they were not about, I think this behavior is wrong. Monash thinks this behavior is wrong. It has been, as a team, we discussed that this is something that we don't tolerate. How do you think we can do this better in the future? And it changed the way how people show up as a result, because they see that they are part of that decision making and they want to be part of that team.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Just to add on, as Francine said, diversity is so easy. I still that, it's a cross section of the society. Look at the society. That society, you need to reflect that in your organization, starting from the ground level to top notch. So that's diversity. That's easy, but inclusion is hard. And a lot of time this is being put on to these diversity committees, or sometimes women or other groups coming up, because this is addition to their workload. So it's very hard for them. So if you need help, seek support. There is a lot of other organizations who can do that for them. But if you're asking your organization members to do it, include them in their KPIs, because they are valid inclusions, right? So it's so important to that to be part of measurement, because it's not an easy, it's a journey to be taken, but you can really progress, see your progress, have those authentic conversations, right? Really see whether you are making progress, and you can. It's like I've met certain organizations who had, diversity got up, within 2-3 years. Of course, inclusion is something which is a little slow, but at least, you have to take the measures what it takes to do. So there can be individuals in your organization happy to take those, opportunities and lead up, then freed up their time because they're really trying to do something good, and give them those opportunities. If not, hire someone, consult them, get into. So it's very important to come up with that sort of categories, understand what it is, whom are we having as an audience or members in our organization, and then we can have a plan set up. So nothing is impossible. but we can.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to open up to the floor, to this online and hub lecture theatre as well, if there's any other questions.
And Linka, I'll help you out here by looking to see if anyone in the room's putting their hand up, and we've got a roving mic, I think. So do you want to start online or in the room, Linka?
I think in the room is great.
Okay, well, we've got Hugh here.
Hi, thank you both for fantastic talks. It was very interesting, lots of food for thought. Dr. Marcus, my question is for you. I think if I'm not mistaken, one of your initial slides talked about reasons for people leaving the workplace. And I just remember being surprised to see, I think innovation was there, or high innovation or something. And that's often seen as something that is such a positive, but it sounds like there may be some negative effects that we're unaware of.
I think it's more related to the constant need for high innovation. And I think like we're attracted to research because we're curious people, we like, and that comes to some degree with innovation, but it's the constant pressure for innovation. So that's one of the key things, yeah.
Interesting, thank you.
Any other questions from the room? Not at the moment. Linka, do you want to, is anyone put their hands up?
Do we have any
there?
questions online? It's hard in the hybrid format. I had another point I wanted to just touch on before we run out of time. And this was that point about failing is okay, and using failures to really launch new successes, or, you know, using those opportunities to pivot, address the failure, because our culture is very much, I think, scared of failing. And, you know, at multiple times in our careers as researchers, we meet failures, and it can be really disheartening and lead to that kind of feeling that this is not necessarily the right career for me, and so on and so forth. So I just really liked how you touched on how you address failure in your group, Francine. But I wanted to know if there are any other ways that you can see that opens up the doors for new opportunities and conversations to then exactly support culture as well in the workplace as well.
I think like one of the things that we do is sharing failure. Like we don't hide away. We don't, hide the papers papers get rejected, grants, get rejected. Like that happens to every single researcher. We don't hide that as team members. We share when those things happen, and then we try to together troubleshoot for solutions. When a project also gets negative results, or gets a hypothesis, gets results that is different from the hypothesis, we'll share things that are not polished, that is not, perfect slides in a lab meeting, to try to really discuss of what can we think about that is outside the box, that is different, that could help us to explain that. And I think it's a lot about normalizing the failure as well, instead of just trying to hide it and make it as if it was something shameful. And I think that drives people away as well, because the reality is that so many of these things, they're going to happen to every single researcher. I don't think I have ever met a researcher that hasn't had a paper rejected, a grant that wasn't successful, or an experiment that didn't go according to the hypothesis. So, yeah.
Just extending that failure out, before we started the session, we talked about where we as groups make mistakes in terms of we're not necessarily, we haven't maybe historically been great at encompassing diversity or supporting different members of the team. And I think that that's another point where we can really reflect on our own group culture and recognise that mistakes we've made along the way are learning opportunities. And I don't know if you're having other conversations with other groups, or people have come to you and said, this is what we did in our group, how can we improve that next time? And if you had any other points of advice for that, both of you as well.
Just to share on that, I think it's always good to start with a sorry and an apology, because sometimes you have not, like organizations, if you have made a bad decision or couldn't do great, I think it's starting from there. It's nice, because the people who have got hurt or, let down, it would be a nice starting point of conversation, opening up everyone's to kind of move forward from there. it's fine, as I said, it's sometimes because it's not your lived experience, you don't know of someone who have that lived experience or that so sometimes you are not aware about all of them. So that's why it's so important to discuss and then open up. But just apologizing for if there was something done, and then start the conversation from there, so then people feel more welcome and come in and to share their ideas, and together we can move forward and create better work environment.
Yeah, that's great. I can see a hand up in the room. So I just before we break for lunch, if there's any other questions.
Yeah, thanks, Linka. I had one remaining one. Francine, that was beautifully put the different ways that you should change the conversation to be supportive. I love the examples of the words you can use. So one thing, and I agree completely with everything you said, one thing that I'm trying to fit into that box, and I'm really curious, I'm sure you've addressed this yourself, I'm very curious on your input into this, is for the people that we mentor or help grow in their careers, one thing that they will face, and that's inevitable in academia, is criticism. We get it on our papers, we get it on our grants, we have to sort of prepare for it. It's helpful for the scientific process, of course, it's why it exists. And it is, after all, a competitive world, academia especially so. So we actually, I remember telling a friend that worked in finance, yeah, we train our people for criticism, and she almost died. I couldn't believe that we would do that to each other. So how would you, what do you think of that? And how would you do that in a positive way that doesn't really impact negatively on that group and team culture?
You mean as a reviewer?
No, within your team, do you think about preparing your people for what they're going to get from reviewers?
That's a good question. We don't tend to talk about it beforehand, but we'll discuss once we get the comments and how we address the comments, and also teaching them language. I think like for people that have had experience with peer review before, that the comments sometimes they say much worse than they are. And perhaps like as I do prepare them to be a reviewer and to ask comments that are relevant, and also ask in a way that is kind and respectful, because it's always a person on the other side, right? And we forget how big the impact can be on especially the junior researchers reading the comments later. But we talk about like how we could, even like sometimes as a reviewer, how we could have asked the question in a different way to ask the same question, perhaps in a way that is not as aggressive. So yeah, but that's a very good point. But I like how you're already using the right word, saying I'm curious. So well done. But I like your point, and I'll think about how I can apply that better.
Awesome, thank you.
So, Linka, I think for time's sake, we probably need to draw to close. So, just to thank Francine and Ruwangi and yourself and the whole GDI committee, the School of Translational Medicine, for organising and your leadership in bringing this symposium together, or seminar together. And it's really thought-provoking, and I saw everyone listening intently and reflecting, and hopefully we'll all take it back to our workplaces and influence how we make the culture here even better than it is at the moment. I think we have some lunch. I hope we have a little bit of lunch for those who are here as a reward for those who turned up in person. If we don't, I apologise. But that was the plan. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you so much, Francine and Ruwangi. Really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you, my pleasure.
And yeah, we'll be in touch if there's any other further follow-up as well. This seminar was recorded for people within the school. It's not shared more broadly. Just if that's okay with you both, just for school members who couldn't attend, because it's a clinical school.